Welcome back to Spotlight. I've been having a very interesting discussion with Dr. Sally Powis from the Kingwood Trust, and I was also talking with Ms. Osborne, Susan Osborne of the Kingwood Trust, and we are talking about autism on a program that's going to be set up here in the BVI to mitigate with persons who are autistic. I'm trying to refrain from saying children because there's a wide spectrum and there's a wide age group. It's a lifelong disease, and we need to know about it, understand it, know how to relate to it, how to help those persons to realize their full potential. And I think that's what this new program is attempting to do. The phone number is going to pop up on the screen. Yes, they are on the screen. And I don't know them, so I can't repeat them. But you can call. You can call us as soon as you're ready, and you can text, so we can read your text on air, and you can participate in the discussion. I left off talking about asking you about, what you see as persons who are labeled autistic with phenomenal talent. Mm-hmm. Whether they are musicians, they are good at mathematics, artists. They just figure out everything. It's just amazing. So I want to talk about how that is. But first, we're gonna go to the phone. Thank you very much for calling Spotlight. Go right ahead, please. You're on Spotlight. Speak to me.
Yeah, good night.
Good night.
Are those people being employed and able to function like ordinary people?
Did you get a question?
Those people being employed able to function like ordinary people. Mm-hmm. I think it depends what the employment is, what the job is that they're doing. So the kind of crux of successful employment for somebody on the spectrum is finding what their particular strength is, what their particular interest is, and channeling that into employment. So that can be any range of things. We have a lady back in England where I work who severe autism, quite a serious learning disability as well, and her obsessive interest, if you like, is in rubbish, litter. So actually that was becoming quite a problem in the home. So because she would be going through the rubbish bins, as soon as they emptied it, she'd be going out and getting it, she'd be bringing it back in again. But they found her a job in the local parks department picking up the litter, and she loves it. She's happy as anything, she really enjoys what she's doing. It's a valued job that she's doing. So from the extreme end of somebody who might be thought to not have many abilities that you could use in life, they've found an employment for her that's been very successful. If you go right at the other end of the scale, there's a kind of common, what would you call it, standing joke, if you like, in the UK, that probably half the professors at Oxford and Cambridge are probably Asperger's, because they're not terribly skilled socially, but they might have one area of quite narrow interest that they've made into a real passion, and they are a world expert in it. So it's how do you find that one thing for that person, I think, that's right, and then you go with that and you really help them to work with that.
Kuala, you want to follow up, or you have your question?
Yeah, I still have your phone kind of noise in it. I heard something, but I want to ask, so after they grow up and they live by themselves, or they like function like you would be responsible for paying all utility bills and be on top of things like that, without people reminding them of those regular functions?
Yeah, what kind of lives can an autistic person lead?
I think again it's wildly varying because people have such different levels of ability. Mm-hmm. So the people who I think that you're kind of referring to, who are perhaps more able, might be able to, either might be taught or helped to be able to manage their bills, to do their utilities, that kind of thing. We in Kingwood have supported some people who have written books. They're very able people, but they might need maybe 1 hour a week of somebody coming in just to help them with the things that they're really anxious with. The gentleman I'm thinking of can write a book and publish. He can't change a light bulb, and he goes into a complete anxious meltdown at the idea of having to change a light bulb. So again, it's knowing the individual, as you said, working out what it is that helps that individual, that helps them manage their life. So some people might be able to live very independent lives.
Okay.
Sorry, go on.
And the last one is, people say that usually bright people, but could they make decisions or they have to follow pursuit?
Sorry, I didn't get that.
The last part? Say the last part again.
Yeah, people usually say that they are bright, very bright people. But could they make decisions or they just follow pursuit?
They just follow.
Like, they just see you doing things and they just follow, or could they make decisions without help?
Can they make decisions?
Yes, or they just imitate what they see around them. Yeah.
No, they might be able to make decisions for themselves. One of the issues we do know is choice. So for a lot of people who get very anxious, making choices is really difficult. So when we're working with staff and training people, sometimes we might only give people 2 choices. And even somebody who's very able might really struggle to make a whole load of choices. So sometimes in helping someone make decisions, you might have to narrow down, that it might be the support staff, it might be family, whoever is helping narrow down the choices.
They have different stages of it, or just most people are on the same level?
No, different, a range.
No, different, a range of abilities, a range of levels.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you very much.
Yes,
pleasure.
Thank you very much for calling. Appreciate that call. Yes, so it's a wide topic, and there's a lot to discuss.
I think that's what makes it so, for me, so challenging and so interesting, and so challenging in terms of support, because you're not dealing with just, as you were saying, kind of every person is different. You're not dealing with just one, everyone's going to be like this, we'll just roll out this. You've got to know the individual.
And I was talking about the what I call super abilities before the caller. How does that happen? Has anyone been able to give an explanation as to how it is a person who seemed to be so disabled in one thing, certain things, a few things, but so special, super in other things?
I don't think they've been able to pin it down yet. So what you're talking about is what they call idiot savant, so or islets of ability, they like to talk about. So these people who'll be quite disabled in many ways, but might be have like calendar memories. So the ones that people know through the films are people who you can say, what day was this, or your birthday, or how old you are, and they'll tell you just like that. They can work out backwards what a date is. They can tell you exactly when things happened. Or people who, one gentleman in Oxfordshire who can hear a tune and will sit down and play it instantly on the piano. He's actually blind, so he can't read music, but he's autistic and he will play instantly. Incredibly talented person. If you think neurologically, in terms of the brain, the supposition is that whereas some areas of the brain are not working as well, the connections are not happening for the language and for the other abilities, something is going on in this particular area of the brain that means that this person has really amazing skills in that area. So the thinking is it's some differences that are going on in the brain, but there's not been enough research to pin that down yet and to work out what's going on.
Could you be married to an autistic person and not know it?
Yes, it's possible.
That's very possible, I think, yes. Autism is more common in men than in women, in males than in females. And so there are it's kind of 4 to 5 times the number of males to females. So I suspect, there's probably a lot of men out there, husbands, who, what often happens for me is I might be meeting with a family, meeting with a mum, diagnosing a child, a son, and we'll be going through the whole kind of, is he like this? Does he have problems like this, for about 2 hours? And then often she'll go, you've just described my husband. And of course there's a genetic link to it. So you think, okay, so maybe it is more than possible that there would be husbands who have autism as well, that they might have just been seen as not terribly sociable, or recognising, well, he doesn't like to go to parties so we don't go, or he doesn't like to do this so we don't do that. It's perfectly possible to have a successful marriage, with somebody on the autistic spectrum.
Well, how does I suspect that a child that's autistic on the, I don't know which end of the spectrum, the high end of the spectrum or the low end of the spectrum, would be the lower end of the spectrum, somebody who's sort of really debilitated.
On the lower end of the spectrum.
Lower end of the spectrum. How do you help the families to cope with that situation? And what should families do in those types of situations? What can we say to those persons who have children that have been diagnosed as autistic and who not function very well?
I think it depends on the family's needs. So again, not every family will feel that they need massive amounts of input. Some families will, if they have several other children, and it's the autistic child is, we were just talking in the break about some families where the autistic child might take up all the mother's time and attention, and in those situations marriages can suffer and other children can suffer. So it depends on the family, how they're coping, how well they're resourced in terms of their emotional resources, the time they have, the money they have to be able to put into the child. Some families need a lot of support, some don't, and the parents, particularly mums, often invariably end up being the expert in that child, because as Sue was saying, they learn through trial and error. They've worked out what works for their child, which is why it's really important to also work with the families, with the mums, to understand how they're coping, and then what they would like from services. What can we do to support them, to help them?
Okay. Are there types of medication that is administered to autistic children, or medication is not required at all?
Well, there is medication that is given to autistic children and adults. The general understanding, if you like, in England we have what they call the NICE guidelines, which are National Institute of Clinical Excellence, and most prescribing and most medication and most interventions are looked at by this body, and they look at all the research and they come up with recommendations for what health practitioners should be doing and using. At the moment we just have some draft guidelines coming through, and the feeling is for children and for adults that there is no medication that can justifiably be used for core symptoms of autism. So there is no medication that will change or help somebody's basic core symptoms of autism. However, if they have depression or anxiety to such a degree that people feel that something would help, then just like if you or I have depression, or if you or I have an anxiety disorder or something, the same medication that would be used for those can be used to help the depression or anxiety. What they found is a very small dose often works, whereas sometimes the normal dose doesn't work. Ironically, you have to go down to a very little dose quite often, because people on the spectrum appear to be very sensitive to the effects of medication. So some famous people, I don't know, people like Temple Grandin, who's fairly well known throughout the world, who lives in America, she will say that a quarter of the dose for depression and anxiety is what helps her and works for her, but no more than that.
Okay. So the treatment is mostly psychological. Is it? Well, there's no treatment. So what we do? We're just managing the situation.
The treatment, if you like. Sorry?
I guess coping mechanisms.
Yeah, it's coping mechanisms, and it's the environment. So actually, it's why it's really important, like you were talking beforehand, about getting the school environment right. So it's much easier to change the environment than to change the person. So because a lot of the triggers are environmental, so things like noise, light, heat, touch, there's a lot of sensory problems go on with people on the spectrum. So if you can get the environment right, you're already halfway there.
Okay, we're going to take a break. We have about 15 minutes remaining. We hope to hear from you. You can call us. The number is going to be on the screen, or you could send us a text message. We'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Keep it locked. We're going to come right back with final words from our guests right after these words from our sponsors.
Spotlight is brought to you by Bolo's High-Tech Printery, Virgin Island Motors, and Clarence Thomas Limited.